We are heading down to the pond today, but we are not going to do swimming or fishing or anything. No, we are going to be frogs, and we are going to jump around on little lily pads, trying to catch some fireflies and hopefully not get eaten by a big dangerous fish. This here is Perilous Pond, a game from Frozen Maze Games. It's 2 to 4 player gameplay, and it is heading to Kickstarter really soon. In this video I am of course going to show you the setup of the game, but also how you play it. So let's just take a look at this. Here we have the setup of the game. In the center of the table we have the lily pads. This is where the different frogs will jump around. Now this here is a 4-player game. If it would have been a 2-player game, there would have been less lilies and the pattern would also have been smaller. First, each player needs to choose a frog in a color that they would like to portray as, and then take the matching pike card. Now we need to place out the round track card, looking like this. In this game there are 10 rounds, and you will keep a track on those rounds on this card. Now we need to shuffle the lily pad cards, and then place them out in the pattern that I have shown here. We start in the top left corner, placing out cards. We place 5 cards in a row, and there will be 4 rows total. And like I said, if this would have been a 2-player game, there would have been less cards. So keep that in mind. These cards have 2 different sides. This side here is the floating side and should be used at the start of the game. The other side is the submerged side, where the lily pad is below water. We then need to place out the fireflies according to their color next to the player area. Next we need to shuffle the objective deck, looking like this. When we have shuffled it, we place it next to the gaming area and we deal out 3 cards to each player. Now each player gets to look at their cards. They get to choose one in secret and send the 2 other cards to the player on their left. This is the way we keep going around the table until each player have 3 cards. These cards are your objectives and should be placed visible for all players to see. The starting player is whoever saw a frog in real life latest. And of course, I see frogs all the time, so I get to place mine first. So the starting player starts by choosing a card around the edges of the pond to place out their little frog. This will be your starting position. And then the other players get to place out their frogs around the pond's edges, but you cannot place your frog on the same lily pad as another player. There can only be 1 frog per lily pad. When we have placed out our frogs, it's time for us to place out the fireflies. As you can see, the fireflies have different colors, matching the colors of the cards on the table. We should always place the same color firefly as the lily pad card has, meaning that on this one a white one will be placed. Here we would place a red, here a yellow, and here a blue. We start placing out fireflies on the top left card next to the round tracker. And then we place out fireflies on every other empty lily pad cards, meaning that we need to skip 1 lily pad and place on the next. But if a card has a frog on it, we need to skip that one as well, meaning that in this case here we would skip the red, we would skip the white, and we would place one on the blue. Then we would skip the yellow one and place another one on the blue. Again skipping yellow and placing a white. Here we would need to skip the yellow one, the white one again, and then place on the blue. This is the way we keep on going until each other card have 1 firefly. Next we also need to place out the pike, the big bad fish that will cause danger to your frogs. We will do this by rolling the 5 die. And eventually when we roll, we would get one of the pike symbols. If we get several pike symbols during a roll, we need to place the pike on the first card starting from the round tracker that matches the color of the die you have rolled. Meaning that if you, for example, roll a red and a yellow pike symbol on your dice, you would place it on the red, as that one is first in line before the yellow one. Now the setup is done and we are ready to start playing. So this game is about you being a little frog jumping around on the different lily pads, trying to catch and eat fireflies. These fireflies will give you points at the end of the game. And this game is played out during 10 rounds. During each round, one player will do their turn to the fullest. Once they have gone through the 5 steps of a player's turn, the turn goes on to the player on their left. Now, step number 1 is only played if your frog is in the water at the start of your turn. If the frog is on a lily pad, well then you do not need to do the first step, because the first step is to climb back up on a lily pad. If you start your turn with your frog in the water, you would need to start your turn by climbing back up onto the lily pads. And your frog can fall off to the sides of the pond, but it could also fall off in the middle of the pond between the lily pads. If your frog falls off one of the edges, it would need to climb back up on one of the available lily pad cards on the edge. Now remember, you cannot climb up on any card that already have a frog or a pike. So you need to choose one of the available cards that has a firefly or is empty. This one here, for example. But if all the cards that you are trying to jump up on are occupied or missing, a player would need to place a new lily card from the supply with the submerged side facing up on any available spot. And now the frog can climb up on that one instead. If the frog instead have fallen in the water in between the lily pads in the middle of the pond, it would need to climb up on one of the adjacent cards. Adjacent being next to them side by side. Diagonal is not adjacent. But if the ones that you are trying to get up on is already occupied, you would again need to take one of the lily pad cards from the supply and place it with the submerged side facing up. But this time you place it beneath your frog. Now that was the first step of a player's turn. And again, of course, if you are not in the water, well, you would not need to climb up from the water. But step 2 in a player's turn is to roll some die, to determine what you can actually do during your round. And you can have up to 2 re-rolls, meaning that you could roll once. If you're not happy, then you could roll again. And lastly, you could roll 3 times total and then it stops. But during your rolls, if you get any pike results, you would need to take that die and put it on your pike card, locking that die, meaning that you cannot re-roll that die during your turn anymore. But you can still re-roll the rest. And you do not need to roll all the 3 times if you don't want to. If you are happy with your first result, well, then go with it. But what do the different die results actually mean? Let's start by looking at the movement actions of your frog. This one here would mean that you would be able to move from one lily pad to another. This one here would give you the ability to jump, and this one here would give you the ability to catch and pull. And you can use these in any order you would like to, meaning that you could first catch a fly, then you could move to a lily pad and then jump ahead. Let me show you. This is the die results that the red player got. And like I told you, they can use these die any way that they would like to do. They would like to go over here and catch a firefly. So they can actually use their jump ability to jump directly to this firefly. This ability will let you jump over one lily pad. But when you use any jump or move effects, the lily pads will also be affected. The lily pads that you took off from will be lowered into the water 1 step. So this yellow lily pad here is now lowered 1 step below the surface. It is now submerged. The lily pad you land on is not affected, however. But now this player have used their jump ability. So now they have catch and pull and move left. They choose to use the catch and catch one firefly. And now they have one movement left. They use that to move over here to the next lily pad. And this lily pad here is actually not affected this time, because the lily pads that you move away from are only affected if this is your first movement action. So for now, this one is above water. When you move your frog, you can move them side to sides, you can move them down and up, but you cannot move them diagonal. And you can never land your frog where there is another frog. So during your turn, you can move and you can jump out on the lily pads. Now, the move result can be split up, meaning that you could choose to move, then catch a firefly, and then move again. But the jump result cannot be split up. So if you get 2 or 3 jump results, you would need to add them together in one single jump. You also need to use all your move and jump results. So you cannot ignore one movement if you are in a tight spot, meaning that you might need to move into the water. No, you will have to move. This can, of course, sometimes cause your frog to end up in the water. When this happens, well, you need to let go of one of your fireflies. But you can choose which one you would like to give back. So I just showed you that you can also use the catch ability. But the catch ability actually have one more ability, because you can also use that result as a push instead. If you get 2 of the catch and pull effect, you can use these in different ways. You could split this up, meaning that you could choose to catch one firefly where you're standing, and then you could choose to move one step if you have the move effect, and then use the next catch effect on that card. But if you use these two together, you can also create a more powerful action. If you have 2 of these together, you could use them to reach a firefly that is on a card next to yours, either horizontal or vertical. But you cannot catch a firefly if it is occupied by another player. But now you could instead choose to push this player away from this lily pad. When these 2 are combined, you now also have the push effect. So if you use the push effect, the frog will now be pushed 1 step away from the lily pad it was standing on. Now this frog here was lucky because it landed on a lily pad that did not have any pike on it. And it could also have been completely empty, meaning that it ended up in the water. If you push another player's frog onto a lily pad that has the pike or down into the water, they will need to get rid of one of their cached firefly in a color of their choosing. And you can actually make this effect even stronger. If you have even more of the catch and pull effect, this will give you the ability to reach even further. For each extra catch and pull die result that you have will allow the player to target a frog on a lily pad 1 card further away. If a player pushes a frog onto a lily pad that already has another frog, this will cause a chainy reaction, pushing off the last frog to another lily pad, or in this case, into the water. Again, if the player ends up in the water, they would need to get rid of 1 firefly, again in a color of their choosing. So that was the die results that lets you control your frogs. But we have 2 more results. The next one I want to show you is where you can manipulate the lilies out on the board. If you get a die result with a lily on, you can choose to do 2 things. You can choose to either lower or raise a certain lily in a certain color, depending on which color you get on the die result, either 1 step up above the surface or 1 step down below the surface. But you can also choose to move the lilies around out on the table. So if you get this die result here, you could choose to manipulate the movement or raise and lower 1 blue and 1 red lily pad. But if there is a frog on the lily pad that you want to manipulate, well, you cannot. You can only manipulate lily pads that don't have a frog on them. But with the red result here, you could choose to manipulate the red card here. And since this one is submerged, you could either choose to raise it up one level, meaning flipping it over to the side where the lily pad is completely above water. Or you could choose to lower it one more step and completely removing it from the pond. But you can also use this die result to move a lily pad that has the same color as the die you rolled. And you can move this lily pad even if an opponent's frog is on the card. And you can move these vertical or horizontal. But you cannot, however, move into a space where a frog is. So if this red player have fallen into the water, you could not move the card above the frog, as you cannot cover it. You can, however, move the card down where the pike is. The pike would now end up on top of the card instead. And you would force this player to lose one firefly. The card can, of course, only move onto spots that are empty. So you could not move them to the sides here. And you cannot move the card off the edges of the pond. So the last action the players can do is to place a firefly. Here you would again take a firefly of the same color of the die and put it out on one of the available lily pads that has the same color as the die result and of course also as the firefly. So you could not put a red firefly on a white card and so on. And again, you can of course get several firefly results, meaning that in that case you would need to put out several fireflies of that matching color. And you need to place out the firefly results. You can't skip them. So that was the die results where you as a player can do some actions. But remember that we had the pike result as well. These were the dice that we put on our little card down here. Now, when we have done all our movements, we have pushed some frogs around or put out some fireflies, we would need to actually activate the pike itself. So if we would get this die result here, we would start by resolving the blue die. The pike itself will move from left to right, going down in the pond, meaning that the pike would stop at the first blue card, matching the result of the die. When the pike goes here, it would scare any frogs on that lily pad, causing them to lose one firefly. When we have resolved that die, we move on to the next die, in this case the yellow result. Again, the pike moved from left to right, going down, landing on the first yellow card, again scaring that frog and causing them to lose one firefly. The last result we have is the red result. Now the pike would swim and go to the red card. But this time the frog that it had passed will not get scared, as it did not stop on that card. So that was if the players roll one pike per die result, then they would need to take that one pike and put it on the first number, and going on. But what if you roll several pikes during one roll? Well, then you would need to take all of those pikes during that roll and put it on the corresponding number of that roll. When you are going to resolve the pikes, the player itself determines in which order the different pikes on that number is resolved. This means that during one of the resolves where you move the pike, you might have 3 or more dice if you are really unlucky. That was the first step of a player's turn. The fifth and last step is to resolve any objective cards, if you want to. There are quite a few objectives in this game where the players can get fireflies from for completing. If the color is white, it especially refers to a white firefly. But if there are black, they mean any color out on the board. This one here would give you 2 white fireflies if you have pushed another frog during your turn. This one here, for example, would give you 1 firefly if you have manipulated 2 lilies during your turn. This one here means that if you have rolled 5 pike results during your turn, you could fulfill this objectives. This one here means that if the pike managed to scare a frog during your turn, well then You could get some fireflies as well. And if you have scared several frogs during your turn, you can take the firefly matching the color of the card where you scared the frog. Here you would get 1 yellow firefly if you have tampered with 2 white lilies. On this card here, you will get a certain color firefly depending on how many fireflies you have placed out in the pond during your game. If you have managed to jump over the pike, you will get this firefly. When you have fulfilled any objectives that you want to fulfill, that is, you get to take that card and put it face down in front of you, showing that now you have fulfilled this objective. When we come to round number 5 during this game, we get to refill our objectives, meaning that we get 1 new objective for the ones that we have completed. But we also get to remove any objectives that we feel like we are not going to complete, to get new ones there as well. And that's the way the game goes on. Player taking their turn, doing the 5 steps during a player turn. Once they are done, they move to the player on their left, and that is the way the game moves on for 10 rounds. Once we hit round number 10, we will fulfill that round, and then it's time for us to calculate some scores. Before we see what kind of scores we have received, we will need to see if we get any bonus fireflies, because if you are the player that have the most fireflies of a certain color firefly, you will get 1 bonus firefly, meaning that if you are the player that have the most blue ones, you would get 1 bonus blue. But if you are the player that has the most white ones, you will get a bonus yellow. And if you are the one that has the most yellow ones, you will get a bonus white one. Once we have received any bonuses, it's time for us to calculate how many points we actually received. Because each of these different colored fireflies are worth a certain amount of points. Each red firefly is worth 4 points. Each yellow one is worth 3 points. Each blue firefly is worth 2 points. And each white firefly is worth 1 point. This game is a brilliant little game for casual players, but also a great game to play with your family and your kids. To just sit down and actually learn your kids quite a lot of strategy, but in an easy and funny way. But also to play with your casual friends, to just sit down and move the little lily pads around and see them starting to understand what they can actually do when they play this game. Because there are quite a few actions that you can do when you use the die, but also a different way of thinking when you want to complete your objectives here. So this game is a nice little game to bring out on a little game night, maybe between meals or before you're gonna sit down and do a more heavy game just as a warm-up. I think that this works quite well. There you have it, my friend. That is how you play Perilous Pond, a cute little game for friends and family, for casual players, or if you just want to sit down with your regular gaming crew and have a quite strategic game before maybe a heavier game, or just go through this game a couple of times during one evening to see who becomes the best frog of them all. There will be more links down in the description of this video, so you can find out more about this game if you want to go in, have a look, and read up on this brilliant little game. If you liked the video that I did here, my friend, well, why not subscribe to my channel, give the video a little thumbs up, throw in a comment there, whatever you would like to do. But most importantly, please do not forget to keep on spreading that board gaming love I know you all have. Peace out, my friend.